Why'd you leave her with Liam anyway?
I didn't leave her with Liam. I left her with all of you guys.
No, you didn't.
I stood right there and asked one of you to take her to school because I was running late for work.
I didn't hear you say that.
Me neither.
Me neither.
Did anybody say, yes, Debbie, I will take Franny to school?
Great, take her side.
I'm not taking anybody's side. I'm just saying take some fucking responsibility.
I'm taking all of the responsibility. I am running this entire house. I'm holding down a job, and I have to take care of
Jesus Christ, you're not the only one with shit going on, Debs. If you can't handle it, lean the fuck out. Don't blame us for being a shitty mom.
Let's be honest, being a fan of Shameless is basically a decade-long exercise in emotional masochism. We tuned in every week to watch a group of people we loved find new and creative ways to absolutely ruin their lives. But early on, there was a safety net. There was one character who felt like the moral North Star of the South Side. I'm talking, of course, about Debbie Gallagher. In Season 1, Frank, the human personification of a dumpster fire, literally describes Debbie as being sent by God, a total angel. And for once, the old drunk wasn't lying. She was the kid who stole a baby from a birthday party not because she was a criminal, but because she thought the baby looked lonely and wanted to give it a better home. She was the one scrubbing the floors, managing the household budget at 9 years old, and putting a pillow under Frank while everyone else was busy stepping over his unconscious body. She was the sweetest Gallagher, the one we all rooted for to make it out unscathed. Fast forward to Season 11, and the mere mention of her name in a Reddit thread is enough to start a digital riot. By the end of the series, Debbie isn't just polarizing, she is, for many, the most unlikable character in the history of the show. She's manipulative, she's selfish, she's borderline abusive, and she seems to have lost every ounce of that early season empathy. So what happened? Did the writers just give up? Did they forget who she was? Or is the Debbie Gallagher problem actually the most tragic, realistic portrayal of what happens when the good kid in a dysfunctional family finally breaks? Today, we're doing a deep dive into the architecture of a character downfall. We're looking at the neglect, the trauma, and the Gallagher Squeeze that ruined the South Side's only saint. Chapter 1. The Squeeze, Middle Child Syndrome. To understand why adult Debbie is such a chaotic mess, we have to look at the psychological prison she grew up in. In the Gallagher house, attention is the only real currency, and Debbie was broke from day one. This is what I call the squeeze. Think about the sibling dynamics. You have Fiona, the martyr queen holding the fort. You have Lip, the certified genius who represents the family's only legitimate hope. You have Ian, the disciplined soldier dealing with a heavy biological inheritance. Then you have Carl, the high-voltage chaos agent, and Liam, the literal baby. Where does that leave Debbie? Debbie was the easy one. She was the low-maintenance middle child who didn't get arrested, didn't fail out of school, and didn't have a mental breakdown. And in a house like that, being fine is a death sentence for your development. Because she was self-sufficient, she was effectively invisible. While Fiona was busy bailing Lip out of jail or dealing with Ian's crises, Debbie was self-parenting. This created a specific type of trauma called benign neglect. Nobody was actively trying to hurt her, but nobody was actually raising her either. Her early season altruism, that wasn't just her being a sweet kid, it was a survival strategy. If she could be the useful one, the one who manages the scout fund, the one who takes care of Frank, maybe she'd earn a permanent spot in the family hierarchy. She equated labor with love. But when you're a child and your only value is based on how much work you do for people who are too overwhelmed to notice you, you start to grow a very hard, very sharp outer shell. You realize that being the good kid doesn't get you a hug, it just gets you more laundry. The squeeze forced Debbie to stop looking for emotional support and start looking for leverage. And that shift is where the sweetest Gallagher started to rot from the inside out. Chapter 2. When the Saint Bled. If the squeeze was the slow-motion car crash, then the middle seasons were the point of impact. there's a specific moment where the good kid officially dies, and it's one of the most painful scenes in the entire series, when Frank destroys Debbie's school project. Up until that point, Debbie was still trying to buy Frank's love with kindness. She believed in the Frank that existed in her head, not the one that existed in reality. She spent days building this intricate winter scene for school, poured her heart into it, and Frank, in a fit of drunken, mindless selfishness, smashed it to pieces. The look on her face wasn't just sadness, it was a total systemic reboot. That was the moment Debbie realized that kindness has a 0% return on investment in the South Side. If the person she cared for most could destroy her hard work without a second thought, why should she care about anyone else's feelings? The saint bled out on the kitchen floor that day, and a hustler took her place. She didn't just get angry, she got physical. She hit Frank. She realized that violence and manipulation were the only languages that got results. This is where her behavior starts to get problematic for the audience. We loved her when she was the quiet assistant to the family's chaos. We hated her when she decided to become the CEO of it all. She stopped asking for permission to exist and started demanding it. She realized that in the Gallagher house, you aren't given anything. You have to take it, scam it, or leverage it. This pivot from caretaker to transactional survivalist is the exact point where she starts to lose the audience's sympathy. But from a psychological standpoint, it's the most logical thing she could have done. She was tired of being the only one holding an umbrella in a hurricane while everyone else was busy getting wet. Chapter 3. The Motherhood Life Raft. This brings us to the most controversial arc in her entire history, Franny, the baby trapping of Derek. When Debbie decides she wants a baby at 15, the audience, and Fiona, rightfully loses their minds. On the surface, it looks like a bored teenager making a catastrophic mistake. But if you look deeper, it wasn't about hormones or rebellion. It was a calculated, desperate attempt to build a life raft. She looked at her family and saw a sinking ship. Fiona was checked out, Lip was spiraling, and the house was a war zone. She didn't want a baby, she wanted a permanent person. She wanted someone who, by biological law, could never leave her, never neglect her, and never smash her projects. She was trying to buy the unconditional love she never got from Monica or Frank. This is where the Debbie is ruined argument usually hits its peak. Her logic is completely warped. She meets Derek's family, this stable, organized, loving Hispanic family, and she thinks, if I have his baby, I get that family too. I can skip the Gallagher trauma and just insert myself into a better story. It was a hostile takeover of a new life. But here's the quiet tragedy. In her desperate attempt to be not Monica, she became exactly like her. She used a child as an emotional anchor. She manipulated a boy who didn't want the responsibility. She prioritized her need to be wanted over the actual well-being of the person she was bringing into the world. She thought motherhood would be her Eden, a place before sin where she could finally be the main character. Instead, it just tied her even tighter to the cycle of poverty and resentment she was trying to escape. She didn't want to be a mom, she wanted to be a god to someone because she was tired of being a servant to everyone else.
Where is she? Who the fuck is that?
This is Pepa, Derek's girlfriend. They drove out for my birthday.
Derek's here?
He is. I think he's hiding. Derek, ven acá, hijo. Ven.
Hey, Deb. Franny got so big.
Yeah, that happens.
They surprised me, or I would have told you.
Chapter 4. Love as a Weaponized Tool. Once Debbie realized that motherhood wasn't the automatic, happily ever after she'd scammed her way into, her approach to people shifted into something even darker. If Chapter 1 was about being a servant, and Chapter 3 was about being a god, then Chapter 4 is about being a landlord. By the time we get into the later seasons, every single one of Debbie's relationships, romantic or otherwise, feels like a job interview or a hostile takeover. Let's talk about Maddie. In her early teens, she was basically a reverse groomer, fixating on an older guy because he represented safety and adulthood. When that didn't work, she moved on to Neil. Her relationship with Neil is probably the peak of her Gallagher-esque. Neil was a kind, brain-damaged man who happened to have a stable home and a steady check. Debbie didn't love him, she occupied him. She used her caretaking skills as a down payment for a roof over Franny's head. She leveraged his vulnerability to secure her own survival. It was cold, it was transactional, and it was pure Frank Gallagher logic. Then comes the shift to dating women. Claudia, Julia, Heidi. A lot of fans felt like this arc was forced or out of nowhere, but psychologically, it's the most consistent thing she ever did. After watching the men in her life, Frank, Lip, Ian, and Derek, either abandon her, neglect her, or descend into their own versions of madness, why wouldn't she reject the Gallagher man archetype entirely? In women, she was looking for a maternal figure she could either control or finally belong to. With Claudia, she was the kept woman, trying to buy her way into a higher tax bracket. With Julia, she was the rebel. But with every single one of them, she lacked the one thing the early season Debbie had in spades: actual selfless empathy. She was so terrified of being the victim of someone else's chaos that she became the warden of her own heart. Love wasn't a connection anymore, it was a weaponized tool used to keep the world from pushing her back into the gutter. Chapter 5. Ruined Writing or a Brutal Reality? This brings us to the big meta question that haunts every Shameless forum on the internet. Did the writers ruin Debbie, or did they actually get her exactly right? There's a very popular theory that the writers simply lost the thread. They didn't know what to do with a teen mom, so they just made her as annoying as possible to generate drama. And sure, some of the plot lines in the final seasons are, let's call them creative. But I think that labeling her as a victim of bad writing is an easy out for the audience. The truth is, we hated watching Debbie grow up because she was the only Gallagher who didn't get a hero's arc. Lip got the academic struggle, Ian got the love conquers all military romance, Carl became a cop. They all found ways to channel their Gallagher energy into something the world respects. Debbie didn't. She stayed in the ruins. She stayed in the house. She stayed in the dirt. Her downfall is actually the most realistic portrayal of generational trauma in the show. If you are a middle child in a house of addicts and you are neglected because you are too easy, you don't grow up to be a saint. You grow up to be a person who views the world as a series of threats and opportunities. We loved her when she was the sweetest Gallagher because she made us feel better about the family's dysfunction. She was the one holding the Band-Aid, but when she decided she was done bleeding for everyone else and started making everyone else bleed for her, we couldn't handle it. The writers didn't ruin her, they just stopped sugarcoating what neglect does to an empathetic heart. They showed us that a saint who isn't protected will eventually become a shark just to keep from being eaten. Conclusion: the quiet tragedy of the middle child. So, back to the big question we started with. Did Shameless actually ruin Debbie Gallagher? If you define ruining a character as making them so abrasive that you want to throw your remote through the screen every time they have a monologue, then yeah, mission accomplished. But if you're looking at it from the perspective of storytelling, I'd argue that Debbie is actually the show's greatest success. We hate Debbie because she's the one who stayed. In the grand finale of a prestige drama, we want the Gallagher magic. We want to see Lip find his purpose, Ian find his peace, and Fiona fly off into the sunset. We want to believe that poverty is just a hurdle you jump over to reach your better self. But the reality of the South Side, the reality of growing up with a Frank and a Monica, is that sometimes there is no jump. There is only digging in. Debbie is the literal embodiment of the squeeze. She's what happens when you take a child with a surplus of heart, put her in a house where empathy is a weakness, and leave her in the dark for 10 years. She didn't change into a villain, she evolved into a survivor. She took the hustle of Frank, the instability of Monica, and the work ethic of Fiona, and she fused them into a suit of armor that eventually became her skin. She's a masterclass in how generational trauma doesn't always look like an addiction or a criminal record. Sometimes it looks like a girl who cared too much, realized nobody was caring back, and decided to never be that vulnerable again. And that is the most shameless tragedy of all. But hey, that's just my take on the rise and fall of the South Side's most controversial welder. Now I want to hear from you. At what exact moment did you stop rooting for Debbie? Was it when she tricked Derek into that pregnancy? Was it the stroller theft ring? Or did you, like me, find yourself feeling a weird sense of pity for her even when she was at her worst? Drop a comment below and let's argue about it. Politely, obviously. Thanks for watching.